Hi, today we have with us Radha Chadha, who's written The Maker of Filmmakers, How Jagat Murari and FTII Changed Indian Cinema Forever. Hi, Radha.
Hi, Manjula. So good to be with you.
Yes. So, Radha, like I was saying, I love your book and it's really interesting. And, of course, it's a great portrait of your father and of FTII in its, early days and all the struggles that went into it, you know. But also, I liked how you brought out India in, the post-independence phase, and then in the 70s, the emergency phase, and then going forward. It's really like you've fused everything together very effectively. So, you want to talk about what was the moment when you thought that, okay, I'm just going to do this book about, both my dad and FTI. You mentioned in the forward and all, but for the listeners.
Yeah. So uh, it wasn't a moment, it was a slow, long period of time.
Hmm.
Uh, the book came to me rather than I decided that I'm going to write this book. Uh,
Hmm.
I have another life, which is
Yes.
about luxury brands and advertising and all of that. And this is very different.
Yes.
But my mother, after my father passed away, she called me to their home in Pune and asked me to help her to sort through his papers. Now,
Hmm.
as his daughter, I knew he had a lot of papers, but it was this black box. I didn't know what was in it, excepting occasionally I'd hear my mother complaining, "My God, there's so many papers and there are more." Beyond that. So when I finally dipped into them, and he used to keep them in these old Godrej cupboards, and there
Hmm.
were three steel cupboards full stacked up. There were a
Okay.
couple of trunks as well, which he
Okay.
had. And that's when I realized that I was holding history in my hands. Here
Hmm.
was this man, my father, but at some point he became a character in the book for me.
Hmm.
As a writer, I had to do that. And right from his first trip to the US, which he went on a troop ship, because
Hmm.
that's all the transportation that was available after World War II, and he went
Yes.
at the end of 1945. And so he started writing his journal then, and it became a lifelong habit. For him, I
Hmm.
think that ship, going abroad, going to study cinema, all these were like, pinch me, is this true kind of stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he was clearly recording the biggest thing that was happening to him. And he wrote through that whole month-long journey. And then it simply, like Forrest Gump, who starts running a little bit and then keeps running. So he
Yeah.
kept journaling and diarying till the end of his life, pretty much, barring
Okay.
the last 1 or 2 years. So that was the spine of all the material that I had. Then beyond that, I had letters. I had love letters between them. I had all kinds of other correspondence that he had with other people. He kept records of whatever went on in his life in terms of, reports. Supposing even his first thesis report in
Hmm.
USC, he had that. He had press clippings. He had magazines. He had books. He had whatever was. He had film scripts. He had what he would call shooting notes. He had his class preparation. He taught direction, so how he
Hmm.
prepared those classes. He had those notes. He had records of what students said in those classes. Uh,
Wow.
he would, I think he would dictate them out. So I had this amazing granular, right down to sometimes what they had for dinner, if he was having dinner with someone. Or if it was in Russia and he found it odd to be eating potatoes or something like that. So it was very varied, sometimes very casual, sometimes very deep. So that was the material that I had. So photographs, my God, he had
Yeah,
so
lovely photographs.
yes, yes, which were of course in in a state of varying states of decay, but we had
Hmm.
them restored and all that.
Ah.
Itself, the photographs themselves are a story, so um, and as I got steeped into it, I gained confidence. I started doing a few interviews with the most elderly people who were in
Hmm.
their 90s at that point. I said, let me do this first.
Hmm.
And maybe 2, 3 years into it, of a few trips with my mother and a few interviews, I decided, okay, I'm going to take the plunge. And I think the motivation there was that I am going to tell his story, and I'm going to tell the story of FTII because there is nothing in-depth studied around that. But I
Hmm.
also thought that this is a piece of history which
Yes.
I'm so privileged to have. And I have
Hmm.
it, from the trenches. So it's fresh new material, which I felt I sort of owed it. God alone knows to whom, but I felt I owed it to write it and leave it behind, for him. So that's what I did.
Okay. So it's not just film scholars, I think, because of course for them this is very precious, but also for people interested in India in general and how. I mean, like when I was reading the sections on how these students are like fighting about, art versus commerce and all, and now when we are in this stage where, like the technology has made that debate almost I mean, I can't imagine anybody fighting about it like they did then, you know. So because now and there's one part where I marked as well, where he, when I think one of the visiting professors said everybody should go out into the villages and shoot, and then I was thinking it wasn't possible then, but it's possible now and it's happening now, right? Everybody has a camera and everybody's shooting it. So it's so prescient also in many ways. So, what was going through your head when you like when you came up on, things, incidents like this or other incidents that made you think about how life is like today, which is very different also, and in some ways still similar, especially when it comes to like holding people back and all that hasn't changed with us. So,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I would. Well, to pick on your point about go to the villages and help and film over there. There's even John Grierson, the great
Yes,
documentary filmmaker, who comes and he says that, okay, you guys have been making documentaries as filmmakers, but it hasn't changed rural India all that much.
yeah,
And at that point, rural India was the biggest part of India.
yes, yes.
Development was one of the reasons for filmmaking. And he wanted to put a camera in the hands of villagers themselves,
Yes, yes,
them film and talk about it, and then help raise them themselves.
yeah,
So my father started making films right after independence, which is
mm,
1948 is when he started. And
yeah,
at that time, nation building was a theme, um, which was uh, which was deeply felt. Today
mm,
we don't, or at least that's my sense, that for us, when we do something, we're not thinking, am I nation building with this little piece of work? But for
yeah,
him and his colleagues, it was a reality. They were, right after independence, they were trying to stitch this disparate pieces of our country together, uh,
mm,
or simply how does a democracy function? How do you come from colonial rule and the next day you are a democratic country? But what do I do as a citizen? I'm
yeah,
used to subservience, not asserting my view.
mm,
And so right from that to farming, to we had a massive food problem. How do you help farmers make with rain? How do you stop
yes,
it? And all of that kind of thing. culturally, how do we stop fighting with each other and share a joint culture? For example, he made a film on Mahabalipuram or on
Yes.
Bharatnatyam. But at that time, traveling or even seeing images was difficult. But to
Yeah.
realize, as someone sitting in Delhi, that Bharatnatyam is also my culture, to
Mm.
realize that Mahabalipuram is a part of my country. So
Mm.
those were very different times, and these were building blocks. And that was the first part of his filmmaking career, which was, of course, at Films Division.
Mm.
Um, and then he went from there to the Film Institute, which was also, all these were government initiatives as well.
Yes. Yes.
Film Division, the Film Institute, the National Film Archive, all of which he he was very lucky. He was at the start and was able to found at the founding part of it. He was able to found the National Film Archive, the Film Festival Directorate. So all these pieces, which were meant to raise the game of the film industry,
Mm.
not only as entertainment, but as helping develop the country. So that's what played out. And I've tried to bring that out in the book, but at a very, what one man felt about it and how he saw it at that level. So, as I said earlier, right from the trenches.
Yeah, yeah, and also it was quite surprising. I mean, of course, one knew that Nehru and all these people had these high ideals, but also how Keskar kind of said. I think he was the same person who didn't allow the wives to go into the studio and sing. Also, at some point in AIR, they had a separate entrance or something like that. Some terrible stories there. So I was a little surprised that he was like, that radio salon kind of. So you brought in all that, all those things which are so important at that point and which are now forgotten because of that generation is has moved on, right? So when you were speaking to his contemporaries, what was the sense you got, right? Because some of them, see, they have such an acute memory. I mean, I don't think I like 10 years ago, don't think I can remember as acutely as some of these people, when they're talking to you and they're really old, right? They can remember that, oh, he liked, I mean, it was like how somebody said when he came into the office, it was like the flowers were happy. So clearly this, you know, he's the office assistant. So of course he'd think of those things and remember
Yes.
those things. So, would you like to talk about that, the older people and your interaction with them and getting stuff out of them? Because they seem to have great recall.
Yes, they do. But Manjula, some of these interviews were like 2, 3 hours. You have to,
Um,
uh, it just flows as a conversation, and then one memory triggers another, and suddenly you have all the things that are relevant to you, and then you
mm,
wander off again. So these are not like the interviews that I did in my other life, where you go in focused, you talk about it, and you're out.
yeah.
Here, like soaking in a tub bath kind of thing, as gets a quick shower. Sometimes at the end of 3 hours, you get the gems. So uh,
Yeah.
these are one, they are older people,
Yeah.
and two, these memories are 40, 50, in some cases 60 years ago. So
Yeah.
uh, it's about prodding them into remembering the stuff. But yeah, there were two broad sections of people. One were his contemporaries and some colleagues, some friends, some, just people he knew. And then there
Mm.
were the largest chunk were his students. Uh,
Yes.
when I
Yes.
say students, some of them were in their 80s when I interviewed them. So it's, but however, it's amazing, things are frozen in your mind. They still saw him, saw themselves as young men and
Yeah.
saw him as the principal of the institute or their professor. So
Mm.
that's again another interesting aspect of human memory. Mostly they were all just very, very warm people.
Mm.
There was a mixing up of identities sometimes. Sometimes they thought I was him, which I clearly am not. Uh, but there was this bizarre or very touching incident when someone touched my feet, and I was like,
What?
I'm at least 15 years younger than the person. But for him, it was like, and I was in tears at the end of that whole interaction because this was so touching. For him, he had this, I don't know, virtual chance or something of being with Jagat Murari, his
Mm.
guru or
Mm.
something. So it was something like that. For me, it was like, what do I do?
So for
So
him, it was possibly like, okay, something of the man.
something of the
Right.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, they would invariably share many of their achievements as if they were telling some, not all, but many of them would share their achievements as if they were telling it to my father. Of course, he didn't see what they did. He passed away at some point, or he was an older
Mm.
man.
Mm.
But to put their life together and present it to me
Mm.
also became one of, and it was joyous. It was joyous. And it was also, Manjula, every piece adds up, in the sense that it informs what you write and it makes you understand how much each of these filmmakers achieved in different parts of this whole canvas that is cinema. At that time, it was cinema and television. Today, everything is one large spectrum. You don't really have those boundaries.
Yeah.
Whether they did documentaries, whether they did rural, some people specialized in films for the rural area or for the army or for
Mm.
education or advertising film. Many of them did ad films, which paid the
Mm.
bills while they,
Yeah.
wrote their dreams into other things, or whether it's commercial cinema or
Mm.
whether strongly felt art cinema.
Yeah.
So it was so broad, and whether it's cinematography, editing, uh, they explained to me how sound works and how someone does it. How do you make two lovers heard in a busy airport? And I
Mm.
would sit there and understand that, but actually, I'm also understanding how they were trained. So it was amazing. It was an amazing journey.
Yeah. And how did you get the nuances of the more difficult parts, like the strikes and I mean, and these students like 40, 50 years later, maybe they've like kind of blotted out some bits, and so how did you tease that out of them? And also found that very funny how when Nasiruddin Shah gets a film role, and so then so then he's neutralized, and of course he himself must have realized after he's much older that okay, and all the students must have realized they were just pawns in some larger game, right? And you bring that out. So when you were talking to them, what was it like when they were like, because some of them you say they have no recall of some things, or then they just like brush over some other things which are probably unpleasant memories of themselves to them now. So talk about that. You got it out of them.
Yeah, well, you're a journalist too, so you know how it is to interview people
Yeah.
and talk about it. So it varied, like you said. Some people simply didn't wish to talk about that part and left it out. Two, there
Mm.
was the other extreme who wanted to share or uh, perhaps did not have an opportunity along the way in their lives, but they wanted to set the record straight in terms of what their role was or what they saw at that time. Uh, for the large part, people remembered it as it happened at that time. There were just two or three people who had the opportunity to think back and see their role as different. One of them One of them is a lady director who realizes that who says that I was just a kid, which is true. They were
Which is
all
true. They were all very young.
very young. Some of the courses just required an intermediate, which is, or the acting course just required school. So you
Yeah.
could be, not necessary, but you could be 17, 18, 19, 20. So that's broadly, and some were, of course, older. I think the cutoff varied course by course from 25 years to 30, but no one was older than 30.
Mm.
So and most would be in the younger part. So there's this lady who reflects on the fact that she just followed whatever her seniors told her to do, and it went from there. Um, there were others whose viewpoint of what they did remained strong, and even though they were on the striking side against my father, but they were
Mm.
very clear that that's the right stance to do, which I narrate exactly as they
Mm.
told me.
Yeah.
Uh, it is conflict that makes a story, Manjula.
Yeah, it's very
Yes.
interesting. It
So,
also gives the reader a perspective of how, very young people. I mean, that's one thing that doesn't change, right? How they can be manipulated and be used for, in these battles between, these larger battles. Which, I mean, when it's playing out at the time of the emergency and stuff, it just takes on a different hue, right?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Mm.
The emergency was again another whole part. My father was not there during the emergency. He was in
Yeah,
uh, for the first part, first year and some,
yeah,
where he was just sitting in in Delhi without a job, with a job
yeah.
but without a job.
Without
So
a
it was
job,
this
yeah.
no man's land, and then
Yes.
finally he finds a job, and then within 2 weeks he's plucked out and sent back to the institute. It was just amazing how things could people could be moved around. And
Yeah.
yeah, and then when the emergency is lifted, that's when he faces the biggest one of the biggest strikes at that
Mm.
point.
Yeah. And as somebody who's building this organization, this institution, it must be really difficult to. I mean, instead of having, clearly he wanted to concentrate on building it and getting better equipment, getting better people, getting better students, and imparting, better training, and instead having to deal with all this, which is, I suppose, inevitable, but also it must have. What did like you mentioned that it had an effect on him, right?
Oh, certainly. Certainly, it had a effect on him. I think energies that could have been spent on furthering both the institute and the students' work was frittered away in this fashion over and over again. Uh, and sadly, perhaps to this day,
Yeah.
it has this now history of, taking breaks for other things. So that's, to me, that's not the best way to run an institution, but that's what became part of it. And this, in my book, I try to show all the aspects of uh, all the moving parts that were in play. They were
Mm.
short-term goals, of other
Mm.
people that were being met, while
Yes.
long-term damage was being done to the very DNA of the institute. So I try to uh, illuminate all aspects of it and to show what happened. And perhaps my hope is that at least there is a full analysis that is possible of problems that the Institute faced
Mm.
along the way and may face in the future as well. I hope not, but
Mhm.
but you can go back to the root and say this is why it happened, and at
Mm.
least you know what problem you have to solve with, I think, a fair deal of accuracy.
Mm. I was quite surprised to learn about, there being so much animosity between the acting students and the direction students, and this whole thing where, one read about it, but I didn't know it was like so deeply felt, and then, they were like somebody is burning somebody with a cigarette, and they were like screaming and yelling and having actual fights, and all that's cloaked as, commercial cinema versus art, or, all that, though I'm sure it had personal angles to it also. So let's talk about that. You
The acting versus direction
Yeah.
versus the rest. Yeah, I think there were many aspects. One was there was the actors were typically a lot younger. The
Okay.
entry level requirement was just schooling. It doesn't mean
Mm,
all of them had just done schooling. Many of
mm,
them had graduated. For example, Shabana Azmi came after graduating.
yes.
So did Naveen Nischal, or many of them did.
Mm,
But as a overall bunch, they were younger.
okay.
Uh, then there was this feeling that acting is airy fairy. It's
Oh,
anyone can do it. I can do it, but it is firstly that's not true.
that's not true.
It's not true. Acting is one of
Yeah,
I believe one of the hardest things to do,
I could
and
never do it,
yes.
you know.
And then there was this the acting teacher was Professor Taneja,
Yes,
who my father had found, and he was the only man who had studied firsthand method acting,
yes.
which was at that time like a new technology.
Mm,
It was not the prevalent method in India, certainly, and he had
mm,
studied it from one of its proponents in New York. So they worked really hard. He worked very hard, and the students worked very hard to. The basic thesis was you have to prepare yourself, and it's through a series of improvisations which you do over and over and over and over again for years, and
mm,
you're able to plumb your feelings and emotions, and at a snap you can bring them out. uh,
mm,
but no one, I think, had an understanding of how difficult it is, or plus um, some of them, like Naveen Nishchal at that time, had just had his film had come out, Sawan Bhado, and he was a star, and it seemed disproportionate, the kind of money and all of that. So there was an element of, I think, envy. Okay.
mm,
On
mm,
the other hand, you had direction students and other students who were studying serious cinema, and the institute exposed them to all kinds of cinema, and
mm,
it was. My father believed you have to give choice. One of the things is he was not against commercial cinema. He was not
mm,
against art cinema. For him, everything needed to exist for
mm,
all the students to have their choices to
mm.
make. Whereas in the institute, it became a fight between commercial cinema and art cinema.
But
And he
why? Why? Because I mean,
There were, I think it was not the case in the initial years. For instance, Dharmendra ji passed away just a couple of years
mm,
ago. He visited the institute on an
mm,
annual day, students' annual day. And
oh,
this is, yes. So for the students' annual day, it is not my father calling him, it's the
mm,
students calling him,
mm,
and
mm,
even in the I think this would be 66 or 67, but already he had made some of his, spectacular. He was a star, but
yes,
he
he was
took
a
the
star.
time to
Yeah.
come and do it. But my point is, till then, they loved everything. They loved Satyajit Ray, they loved Dharmender and his kind of cinema. They looked up to Raj Kapoor and all of that. But along the way, art cinema became, and in the book, I tell you the reasons. They were, this wedge was installed that art cinema is the only way. It is a very important way. Part of the institute's role was to allow art cinema to flourish, and that's
Hmm.
what my father enabled.
Hmm.
But it became either or, whereas it will always be both, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, so once and there was a lot of manipulation that was happening to make that a thing to align the students. And believe me, many of them said, no, I want to make commercial cinema. Many of them said, I
hmm.
want to make art cinema, which is
Hmm.
wonderful. But they
Yeah,
were all forced under the umbrella of art cinema. And they were fighting against the acting students who, oh, well, the only roles they had in the 60s, remember the new wave hadn't even started in the 60s.
yes, yes.
The roles they had were in commercial cinema. So there was this tussle and fight, and that's what. Um,
Gosh. So now when these people look back, how do they view it? Like, do they I mean, it seems absurd now that they went to such an extent over
yeah.
this, right? I,
Many of them have lived their lives. If
in
they've
commercial,
made money, then they have lived their lives in commercial cinema. There is no other way to make a living, even if
yes,
it's substantial money. So for most of them who were, not directors, but if you were a cinematographer, or an editor, or a sound a person, then I think many of them didn't have any qualms, if I may use the
yeah,
word, whether
yeah,
they were editing a art film or a commercial film, or they were shooting an art film or a commercial film. Almost all of them did both. Uh, but it was the directors who, most of them, in the early 70s, that's when the new wave
mm,
started. So there was this
yes,
huge opportunity to, triggered by the Institute,
mm,
uh, with that kind of training with really tiny budgets, which was anti-establishment. It did everything that commercial cinema did not do. And
yeah,
that's a beautiful flowering of amazing films that we had at
yes,
that.
some great films, some great
Yes.
films.
Yes, from Uski Roti
Yeah,
onward, they were.
I remember seeing Uski Roti on Doordarshan actually. One never saw it in a theater, but Doordarshan, of course, showed some of these films, Uski Roti, and many of the other films as well. So I remembered, I made a note that I have to watch these films again. So, which I watched like 40 years ago. But yeah, so your book is really nice in that it makes you recall these very important, films, both commercial as well as, the new wave. So, so,
And
so tell me,
language films as well. It
yes,
triggered all these things in these cinematic movements in the States, like Kerala.
yes,
Really went, really took to it, and there was this again a flowering of many, many artsy films.
yeah,
Um, Many centers, Assam,
yes,
Orissa,
yeah,
all of Karnataka, they had
yeah,
these amazing uprising in terms of other kinds of cinema, which was just delightful. I guess you're in the books world. It's the same parallel. You can
yeah, yeah, yeah.
have
That's true.
racy whodunits, and you can have the literary ones. So
True, very true.
that's
And
very
both are interesting and good, and I can't. Yeah, it must have been a struggle for your father to make them understand this because, well, but I guess he tried, and even Satyajit Ray saying all those things that you've quoted in the book that he said at during speeches at the FTII, so and I recall people of a certain generation saying, oh, that's like the 80s, saying that, oh, Ray is not great. And now I'm thinking that it's possibly because of whatever these conflicts. Right. Now, of course, nobody can say that Ray is not great anymore. But there was a period when, people were like looking down on his cinema as well. So it was possibly which I didn't understand why. This is possibly because of this sort of scene happening at FTII, maybe. No?
In terms of Ray at FTI, he was worshipped.
Yeah.
He he was considered a fabulous, role model to look up to. An Indian, perhaps at that time, one of the very few Indian role models that the students
Yes.
aspired to. They may not necessarily have aspired to do his kind of cinema.
Yes. Yes.
Uh, it was one among many cinemas that many of them looked up to. Ray was taught a lot at the
Hmm.
institute as well. Uh, I can relate to your point about Ray not being back then admired as much within India. He was huge
Yeah.
on the world stage. He won
Yes.
everything at every, whether it's Cannes, Berlin, you name it. He was
Yes.
Khan even made a special award for him, which is
Yes. Yes.
exceptional. So he was a giant on the world stage. Within India, he was he had, as you say, divided opinions. Within
Yeah. I
Bengal,
remember that.
yes,
Yeah.
within Bengal, he did very well.
Yeah.
But again, we didn't have even subtitling was a big thing. Uh,
Yes.
Dubbing was huge. So I don't think he had any access to the rest of India. So you had to watch it in Bengali. You were lucky with subtitles. And this kind of art cinema wasn't everyone's cup of tea. We
Mm.
were raised on more commercial cinema at that point.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yes.
So, and I was also like quite struck by how your father got all these people, there. I mean, that itself is such a huge task. Like, really, really, people are legends now, right? He managed to get them both in the commercial and in the, art series cinema space. I mean, he's got Raj Kapoor coming there. He's got Satyajit Ray. He's got Grierson. Everybody. So how did he manage this? This is like a superhuman task, which you probably have an insight into since you were, his daughter. So talk about that.
Manjula, yes, you have hit on a point which intrigued me for years, and I used to keep asking my mother. Many of these people were on her dining table, she was
Yeah.
visit and they would be at home. I have met many of them as a child again, but her answer was that he was very persistent. He would not take no for an answer. So he would,
Okay.
and when he was very young, when he was still at the films division, he went to China for this 1 month trip. And
Hmm.
on that trip, he had some amazing people. He had Prithvi Raj Kapoor, he had
Yes, I
Bimal
saw those
Roy,
pictures.
he
Yeah.
had B.N. Sarkar, he had Kamini Kaushal,
Yes.
uh, he had Balraj Sani. And
Hmm.
they lived together for a month, going from one place to another. And he was the youngest. He was the baby of
Hmm.
that group.
Hmm.
And but he was appointed as the secretary. So he was supposed to take charge of all their admin, getting them here and there. So he was dealing
Hmm.
very intensely with them. And he made some lifelong friendships with them. And
Okay.
he nurtured these friendships, and he suddenly got all of them there to the institute. I recall seeing Kamini Kaushal on our veranda as a
Hmm.
child for coming home for tea, and uh, and then I think, for instance, Prithvi Raj Kapoor led him to Raj Kapoor, and Raj Kapoor
Hmm.
just took to that. He would come for all kinds of duty. He used to host parties for the
Hmm.
graduating class. So it's very
Wow.
generous and large-hearted. So,
Yeah.
farm in Loni. Um, and to answer your question, I even asked Kamni Kaushal,
Mm.
because these are busy people.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
like they are twiddling their thumbs, and it's not like they're giving an hour of their time. They're driving to Pune and they're driving back. Those days,
Yeah.
that itself was 8, 10 hours, and then
Yes.
whatever, and then spending maybe a day or two. And her answer was he was just such a genteel man, and he was asking you in such a sweet way. You couldn't say no. I don't know whether to believe her or not, but perhaps that's it. Because I have searched for that answer over and over and over again, because he was just a government servant heading an institution. And he
Mm.
had all these major filmmakers and actors and international people too.
Mm. Yeah.
Raira Kurosawa,
Yeah.
and at some point it became a thing to do. Once the momentum picks up, then the others want to come. But he
Yes.
got going and he could pay them nothing. The government fees that was allowed was so tiny. It was embarrassing. It was double digit, just to put it out there. So they were not coming for the money. I don't know
Yeah.
if many of them may not have even taken it, because what are they going to do with that paltry
Yeah.
sum? But I feel that it was his outreach, it was his old friendships, which he then reached out to them to give them more access. And
Mm.
I think he was just a super salesman who painted this vision of, new kind of film industry, a new kind of actor, a new kind of
Mm.
director, the trained kind. He somehow got them to put their skin in the Film Institute game.
Yeah.
Uh,
In this new country also, right?
yes, in a country which I call a startup at that time.
Yeah.
Yes. So, yeah.
Wow.
I will never know the complete story on that one, but that is what I believe was the
Mm.
reasons.
And
Because
the pictures tell you all that. I mean, fantastic pictures. That's the first thing that struck me when I got the book. I quick looked at it and wow, what pictures. So then I sat down and focused on it because there's some. I've never seen these pictures anywhere. Most all of them. I haven't seen these pictures. You know, so and they were all in his files.
yeah, he had boxes of photographs as well. He was, well, he started life as a documentary filmmaker. So
Yeah,
he was
yeah,
very much into research and recording.
yes,
In the early days, documentary was about recording reality. Of course, there
yes,
are many versions and whatever shape it has taken today. Uh, so he just kept everything. Um,
wow,
yeah.
superb.
Yes, often to my mother's distress because they were space challenged
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because of this growing thing. But the photographs the negatives are there of many. For some of
Wow.
the pictures, we went back to the negatives because the picture was like one, faded mess.
So all
So
this material, what are you doing with it? Are you like giving it to to the archives, the National Archives, or what? What are you doing with it?
that is my next project, Manjula. And a very,
Oh,
very huge one is to find a home for them, to sort them in a different fashion, in an archival way. I will have to learn that along the way, um, and to place them somewhere safe for future students to look at,
yeah,
future
because this is a
scholars.
treasure trove. Just looking like this book. uh, I mean, it draws from all this information and that you have, and all these pictures and all these papers. But now that you're done with it, and I'm sure there was much more as well that you couldn't include into this, right?
Yes, yes. This is the concentrate. of
Yeah, yeah,
what I could find. But there are so many aspects of so many things. Uh,
yeah.
there's enough to write a book on his films division days enough,
Yeah,
a lot.
I was thinking about that, all the documentaries. I mean, you mentioning the documentaries that he made and the documentaries that the other people who also went to USC made. And I was thinking, there's something in that as well. And I want to know those stories also. So
Yeah,
there are many books that could emerge from that
that
treasure
experience.
trove.
I agree with you. Films division has been studied by scholars to some extent. There can
Mm,
always be more and more and more, but that part I have found. I when I was researching, I found many outside documents and outside papers written and books written. So there is some amount of work that has been done on films division. Uh,
mm.
I'm hoping there'll be more done on the Film Institute now, because that's
Yeah.
also uh, the films division is about making documentary films as well
Mm.
as about making a nation, because that
Yes.
was the objective. The Film Institute is about making fabulous filmmakers, and
Yeah.
the filmmakers themselves then go ahead and achieve other objectives at that
Mm.
time for nation building, but in a different way.
Yeah.
Trained, talented. Um, and one of the unique things was to, uh, in my father's view, in terms of making a filmmaker, it wasn't just about teaching him the craft and the art and the science. Well, the science is required for sound and for cinematography, but also he felt that the most important part was to allow the filmmaker to find his own unique voice
Yeah.
and have the confidence to speak with that voice. There was a lot of copying that went on in that era, you know.
Yes. Yes.
But but to eliminate that and to have the confidence to say what you want to say, to be your authentic self, as well as the again this you have to look at it from the nation building lens to build character, uh,
Mm.
so that these skills, this voice, whatever they do, will help India become a better place, whether it is better fed in terms of food, or it is more harmonious, or it is culturally richer.
Mm.
But to have that character, to use what is around you to make original stuff in your voice. So there was a lot of that shaping that went on. Um,
Mm. And I found this also very interesting. This sort of in the last chapter, you've made this diagram.
yeah,
It says that's fantastic. About this one,
yes,
right? This one.
yes, the secret formula. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's the management. I come from management background. That's what happens when you put someone like me to write a book about filmmaking. It goes into the area of institution building. Whereas there is another lens that you could look at this whole book, and which is that it is an institution. It is
Yes.
about institution. It's about how do you build it, how do you manage it. Uh,
Mm.
all of these things are invisible to,
Mm.
and I don't think I harp on them too much in the book. But ultimately, that's what he did. His biggest accomplishment at the institute would be leading it and
Yeah.
having and creating it. Today, you would fit, like a startup and the founder of it, but
Yes.
it's pretty much doing the same thing, but doing it for the government and perhaps doing it with very little money.
Yeah.
So that's why and for me, one of for me, and especially coming from where I come from, from the management lens, one of the
Mm.
things that kept on fascinating me was how do you so consistently, student after student, course after course, year after year, create not just filmmakers, but brilliant filmmakers. There has
Yes.
there has to be something. that he was doing, and how can I put my fingers on that, and how can I then express it in my own language. So somehow I restrained myself throughout the entire biography, but I said I have to put it in the end. You know what? Radha has to come back into it. Some point. So it's you see it's like a an afterword, but
Yes.
it kind of explains what he was doing.
Yes,
Um,
very effectively it does. Yeah.
yes, it is the formula for making brilliant filmmakers, and I don't think it will ever go out of fashion. The
Mm.
technology has changed,
Yes.
uh, but in terms of how do you create creative people, this formula will always work.
Mm. Right. And one thing I also enjoyed about the book was how it kind of brings out some strange sides of some people. Like I actually quite found the section on Girish Karnad quite funny. I mean, in the end, when he says, watch Ek Tha Tiger, and he,
I was like flummoxed. Now, what do I get out of this? It's
and then
new word. Yeah.
yeah. So explain that, about him saying, watch Ek Tha Tiger and what you get out of it, which you said very nicely in the book, about him saying that your father was right about something.
Yeah. Yeah. The moment when he told me that, it was like at the end of our interview. I was getting into my car and he leaned in and he told me that. So it was like amazing. Firstly, coming, uh, and this whole I think he also his career evolved. At that time, he was always an actor, but at that time in the 70s, he
Hmm.
was also making films. He was
Yes.
a script writer as well as a director.
Hmm.
And, I mean, he was like so flexible. He was brilliant. He could be in any role.
Yeah.
Uh, but as the years went on and the new wave sort of, its sell by date was done,
Yes.
um, which was one of the reasons why I feel that my father never wanted to peg the institute to one movement. You have to have something
Hmm.
internal for an institute. You
Yes.
can't, you can't, hitch your entire bandwagon to something which is going to, all movements rise and then they become part of other movements. So
Yes.
that's thing. But Karnad went on in his later years as an actor in commercial cinema. And I
Yes.
think perhaps that's why he told me to watch Ekta Tiger, because he was the man who was, the holding the flag for art cinema and then had come around to, I think, accepting all kinds of cinema, but had
Yes.
he spent some time in commercial cinema.
Hmm.
Um,
And saying that your father was right after all in the end.
if they'd just done it all at that time, but
Yeah.
we wouldn't have had our story then.
Yes, that's true.
Yes, yes.
So tell me, what was the difficult part about this book? What was the thing that you really had to work on?
Oh, the difficult part was writing about the difficult parts. That was
Um,
very hard. Um, as to separate the daughter from the writer, that was because
mm,
he has some very, very difficult moments. There are moments when, you worry whether he's going to come out alive, literally. Then,
mm,
for instance, he's locked up in that Gherao.
yes.
So you fear for his life as a daughter. As a writer, you just have to tell the story um, as best as you can, in which case he just becomes a character. Now, how do you do that?
Mm,
How do you do that separation within you?
mm,
So that was really hard, Manjula. There were days when I would write one sentence, and probably the next day that sentence would be deleted,
mm,
because it's not good enough. So, but I think my way was to just keep on plodding along on those paths, and or on some days just saying I'll just write any old rubbish that comes out this day, but at least have some words around that thing.
Mm.
Uh, it got done eventually. I don't know
Yeah.
how it got done, but there
Mm.
were many days that were blank days.
Yeah.
There were many days when I got involved in the emotion,
Yeah, I can imagine, when you're writing about your father, falling out with that, with the professor Bahadur, and who
Mhm,
was such a, like, at first he was his deputy, right?
mhm.
Uh, and then, and them falling out and the repercussions of that, right? And that was a very personal thing which became a political thing, as it happens in organizations. We see this often,
Yeah.
right? Something
Yes.
very personal becomes like a festering sore and takes on a different, in the professional setting, takes on a different aspect. So, teasing out the facts of that and writing about that, I thought must have been quite tough.
Quite hard, yes. And to say it from all sides and to be
Yes,
fair about it,
yes,
uh, because he is a revered man as well. So
yes.
take that into account, and to realize that. My father's views were very liberal in terms of allowing all kinds of opinions. Because if
Hmm.
you're going to create filmmakers, you're going to have this whole range of opinions. And in some ways, the more out there, the better. That is what is nurturing creativity. And so he never had a problem with conflicting opinions. But I think the issues were on performance. And
Hmm.
the issues were on performance in a government organization, in a bureaucratic setup,
Hmm.
where the tools for rewarding performance and uh, non-performance, taking action against both cases, your hands are tied. Uh, and to nurture a dream of this, excellence and of creating all that amongst the caste that you have been given in a government setup,
Hmm.
where, unlike a startup today, where you will pay for any talent according to
Yes.
what you want, they were not paid well at all.
Yeah.
Uh, and to rise above that and to expect them to work really hard and to motivate them, it had its challenges. It got done for the first 10 years, but
Hmm.
how do you stretch that beyond that? So those were some of the challenges that he was trying to address.
Hmm.
Uh,
And do you expect, somebody from, I don't know, Professor Bahadur's side to say something in response to this book? Because I'm sure there must be people who, like, like you said, he was also a revered figure. So,
He
you
is
know,
a revered figure.
yeah.
There are many things that I admire about him. Uh, so the families, my mother was very close to his wife. So they
Okay.
were, in fact, my mother took me to meet them as well.
Hmm.
Uh, but this is just history, and I am
Yeah.
just
You put
stating.
it there.
Yes, and I have done my best to support everything. Some pages, every sentence is supported with a annotated,
Yes.
an endnote or a piece of paper, which is in most cases in the public domain, like in the archive, National
Hmm.
Archive thing. Again, I've supported it with a lot of research. Uh,
Okay.
well, one, I have a lot of rich research to, just dig into. Plus, I have done much more than just his.
Yes.
I've gone to archives. I've gone to many other places to get my papers together.
Yeah.
Uh, But the other thing was that over time, his story was never told. And over time, there were myths that had become reality. They were,
Hmm.
as the word of our generation, they were alternative facts. Uh,
Okay.
so I felt the need to really support my writing with research and to have it airtight to the extent that
Okay, great.
yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So, and on that note, I mean, I could keep talking to you because I really find this book very interesting. And I'm sure lots of other books will grow out of it. I really think that a lot of people will be inspired to write on very specific things that jump out from this book. So, for the listeners, go out and get the Maker of Filmmakers, How Jagat Murari and FTII Changed Indian Cinema Forever by Radha Chadha. And it's fantastic and it's a great read and it's really informative and it's also quite inspiring that you've taken on this mammoth task, and so hats off to you for that. Because I mean what the picture that one gets is not just of the man, but also of the time and of this of various decades, and of this institution as well. So, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you so much, Manjula. Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for your kind words.
Okay, bye.